Our Father, hallowed be thy name, hallowed be thy name.
Are we allowed to pray here? Can we just... Oh, great. Let's pray real quickly. Creator God, we honor you this day. You are the first and the last, the beginning and the end. You are Yusen, you are Creator God. There's none. We have nothing to compare you to because you're so great. So our limited understanding limits us to understanding you. But what we do know of you from your word, you are good, and we honor you this day. Oh. So my name is Bryan Brightcloud. I'm Chiricahua Apache, Fort Sill Band, member of the Buffalo Clan, and a member of the Yellow Pollen Warrior Society. I just described to you my whole family lineage, just in a short-term introduction. The Buffalo Clan tells you what my purpose was or what my family's purpose was in the tribe. The Warrior Clan described what Warrior Clan I'm a part of. And I'm also, I don't know if you guys knew this, but every native tribe in North America has a clown society. Did you guys knew that? And they tease you. And when I first met Richard Twist, he teased me, and I just would smile, and finally he goes, you're okay. They'll tease you till the point to where you're ready to sock them or you're crying. And then they'll back off and they'll say, you're okay, because if you get mad, it means you take your life too seriously. So that's what the Warrior Society, or the Clown Societies are all about. It means you're prideful and you can't take teasing. So when one of these two guys tease you, they mean it in a good way. They're not trying to get you to sock them or anything. Or maybe they are, I don't know. So, like I said earlier, or maybe I didn't, I'm a Foursquare guy. And as Native people, we're real hesitant to call each other Christian, because when you say you're a Christian, the Methodists want you to be a Methodist, the Baptists want you to be a Baptist, Foursquares want you to be a Foursquare guy. So we call ourselves followers of the Jesus way. We don't really call ourselves Christians. And when we evangelize, we do it completely different than you guys probably do. And if you read in Scripture, the way that Paul approached the Greek people was completely different than he approached the Jewish people. The gospel never appears outside of culture in the Bible. And you can't go to Indian people and say, you guys are sinners. They'll say, no, we're not. We're sinned against, which is true. We're sinned against. This was all our land at one time. And did you guys know that there's been more native blood spilled on planet Earth than any other people group? More than the Jews, more than the Russians, more than anybody. And when there's human blood that hits the planet, it always opens that arena up for darkness. At Church on the Way, I've been with Pastor Jack for about 30 years, and I actually knew him when he had hair, if you can believe that. But he's been a great guy. He's mentored me along the way, and he's taken our position as contextual people. And I want to talk to you a little bit about native things, and we'll have a time for questions. But, after 500 years of evangelism, less than 3% know the Lord, Indian people. So what is the problem? Is the gospel not strong? The gospel's powerful. The gospel can transform any life. I've seen miraculous things from the gospel. Are the people weak? Indian people weak? Not a chance. We're the most resilient people on the planet, I think, and the most handsome, except for these two guys. But the interesting thing is Jesus taught a parable about the soil. You guys remember that? The seed was cast into the soil. Well, here's my spin on it. Here's the native spin. You guys remember that disaster that happened in Russia? What was that called? What? The nuclear disaster? Chernobyl. Well, there's land over there that's so polluted, for 30 years, nobody will ever live there. There's land that's so toxic for hundreds of years, nobody will ever live there. And there's land that's so toxic for eternity, nobody will ever live there. Well, in this parable that Jesus taught, he likened the soil to the hearts of men, and he likened the seed to the word of God. Well, the Indian people have been so polluted with broken treaties, over 400 lies, deception, their hearts are toxic like that land. And apart from a supernatural cleansing of God, the seed is not going to take. It'll sit there, it'll live, it'll do, what seed does, but it won't grow because the soil is toxic. And so you guys' job is to pray that the Indian people, their hearts are cleansed. Because right now, Indians who don't go to church, they'll go to a talking circle, they'll go to a sweat lodge. Casey's got a tremendous sweat lodge. He's got, what, a 75% recovery rate, something like that, outrageous. But they won't go to church because the church is so harmful to them. The church is so hurtful. The church was part of the boarding school experience, which was a tragedy for this nation. I can't believe it hasn't been recognized. I mean, Indian people the kids were taken from their families. They were bused off to an Indian boarding school. You were whipped on the back if you spoke your tribal language. You couldn't participate in any tribal things. And the tragic thing is when you take a kid and put them in an Indian boarding school, you take away their ability to learn any parenting skills or how to be a good husband or a good wife. And who suffers from that? The next generation. So my son's generation, they're all alcoholic or suicidal, and it gets worse every generation. My son, I'm really proud of him. He's getting his PhD right now at Portland State. He's within a year of getting it. And I have ADD and FAE and PM. No, I don't have that. But I have every learning disability known to man. I went to Haskell Indian School for 9 months. Got kicked out for fighting. There's a detention hall named after me there. I'm very proud of that. But my education is not like these. These guys are the smart, educated ones. I really admire these guys. I never had that chance. And I used to go to church on the way. It's a funny story. And I'd sit in the back row, sinner's row. You guys know. So if you feel too convicted, you can leave without anybody noticing you. And I went there for about 5 years. And the ushers came up to me and they said, "Hey, the pastoral staff wants to meet with you." And I think, am I in sin? No, I'm okay. So I met with them and they said, "Well, we recognize your leadership abilities and the call of God on your life. We would like you to come on staff here. And I think at the time we'll pay for 3/4 a year college tuition at Life Bible College." Wow. And I said, "Wow, that's a great honor." I said, "Thank you, but I would embarrass all of us if I tried to go to college." And so they left me alone for about another 5 years and they called me back in and they said, "How many Indian churches are there in LA?" And I said, "That's easy, there are 8. And they said, "How are they doing?" I said, "They all hate each other." And they said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just like all over Indian country. The churches hate each other because each one of them is doing something a little more right than the one next to them." And they said, "Well, would you be interested in starting a native church here at Church on the Way?" And I go, "No, I'll go to one, but I won't start it." And here's how pastors get you. We'll pray about it. They know they have you. Just pray about it. So I started the Indian church at Church on the Way, and I get this phone call from this guy. And he goes, "My name's Jared Roth. I'd like you to come down to headquarters and talk to me." I go, "What headquarters are you talking about?" And he goes, "Foursquare headquarters." I said, "We have a headquarters? I thought you were talking about Army headquarters." And he goes, No, come down here and talk to me." And I go, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm the vice president of Foursquare." And he goes, "I hear you've been organizing our native pastors." And I said, "I don't know, they're all my friends." And I just had, I went to Scott Bauer and said, "Can I invite our Indian pastors to our fall conference?" And he goes, "Sure, I'll even meet with him." And he goes, "Well, come talk to me." And I said, "Who are you again?" He goes, "I'm Jared Roth." And I go, "What are we gonna do?" And he goes, "We're gonna eat dinner." I said, "Are you gonna pay for it?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll pay for it." So I went down there and he goes, "Tell me about Native issues." And I told him, I said, "Do you want the short version or the long version?" And he goes, "Give me the long version, we got time." And after I was done, he looked like I'd shot him. And he goes, "We have failed as a denomination." I said, "The church has failed." I said, "Do you know that missions across North America has a history of decimating cultures?" Missions has a history of decimating cultures. That's tragic. That's dumb. Nowadays, the governments are so concerned with indigenous plants, indigenous animals. We must protect our indigenous plants. Well, what happened to the indigenous people? Well, we found out that foreign plants and foreign animals will overthrow the native ones. And I said, that sounds really familiar. I said, that's what happened here, huh? And he goes, "Yeah, I guess that is what happened." It's interesting how the governments will not acknowledge what they did to indigenous people. It's just frightening. And the church is right there with them. The church was assigned to run a lot of the boarding schools. That's why Indians don't come to church. It brings back so much trauma. My mom went to an Indian boarding school. Before she passed away, she had burns on her head because they'd wash her hair with gasoline when they had lice. And I go, "Mom, don't you hate white people?" And she goes, "Would it hurt them if I hate them?" He goes, I forgive them. She was a Christian. And I go, how can you forgive them? And she goes, when you hold that bitterness, it eats you alive. She goes, so I choose to forgive them. Just a key that I learned when I was a very young man. She goes, yeah, that's right. Years ago, I was at a conference with our friend Adrian Jacobs. He's a real educated guy like these two guys. And we were sharing a hotel room. And I had gone to Walmart to buy a little pad of paper to keep my notes on. And I had it setting up on a dresser, and I had put a blueberry muffin on it so it kind of soaked through. And I go, Adrian, are you ready for your teaching? And he goes, oh, give me a minute. So he walks over to his laptop and goes, beep, and his notes start coming out of this printer. And he goes, are you ready? And I go, yeah, where's my notes? And he goes, oh, I almost threw that away. So I took out my notes, and I thought, and he goes, you're not educated, are you? And I said, I'm really not educated. I said, I'll tell you how sharp I am. A few weeks ago, I was supposed to speak at this conference. I think it was Christ for the Nations when we were in Texas, was it? Yeah. And I had programmed my VCR to record a show called Great Chiefs of the Southwest. And I thought, well, Geronimo's going to be on there, Mangos, Colorado, all the great chiefs are going to be on there. So I got home, and I had programmed it right. And I sat down, put the tape in, and I'm eating my little dinner, and I'm watching this tape, and I'm thinking, where's Geronimo? It's a bunch of guys cooking with chilies. I realized it's great chefs of the Southwest. Am I sharp or what? So, it's amazing to hang around with these guys because they're too smart for me. But it's interesting because when we go overseas, we get to say whatever we want. There's no people group so positioned for world evangelism like Native people. We were in Pakistan. We were there 10 days. They set an armed guard every time we had a meeting. And they said, these guys are going to keep your peace, but you guys say whatever you want. Because they know our history better than we do. And they give us free reign. And so we preach the gospel in our way, in a way that we understand it. And they said, wow, you guys they love you here. 5,200 people got saved when we were over there in Pakistan, Islamic people, because of the way we present the gospel. And I'll tell you how that is. We go into these cultures and we say, we have old Apache songs called The Path of Beauty. There's an actual song called The Path of Beauty. We believe that Creator God created mankind to walk a path of beauty. And man in his arrogance walked away from that path. So Creator God sent a representative to show us back to the path of beauty. Some cultures call him Yeshua, some call him Jesus. He is the way maker back to the path of beauty. Indian people understand that. But you can't go to them and say, hey, you guys are sinners who need a savior. They'll say, no, we're not. We're sinned against. So you become a part of the culture and you win them for the Lord. I remember I used to play dominoes with Dr. Winter, and we'd have these endless discussions, and I'd say, man, Dr. Winter, you're 30 years ahead of your time. His ideas were probably 30 years ahead. And he goes, yeah, I know. He goes, the most effective missionaries in history became part of the culture. Watchman Nee, all these great missionaries. They never approached it, and a lot of them got kicked out of their denominations because it was too weird. It was unheard of. So, I want to thank you guys for having the powwow here. We've been having it for 17 years. And the interesting thing is I have my arena director. He's the one that directs the arena for me. His grandpa was a Foursquare pastor. And I go, well, why aren't you walking with God? And he goes, well, my second wife, her parents just really attacked me and told me I was a sinner. And I said, well, have you ever felt the presence of God? And he goes, oh yeah, Bryan. He goes, I got saved at a Calvary Chapel church. And I said, well, I don't understand. And he goes, they condemn our Indian ways. And even today, if you go to the churches in the Southwest, they're either in a little Pentecostal box or they're in a little Baptist box. And I don't know if they all started during the old tent revival days. I guess they all started back then. But that's the only thing they'll look at. They think we're all a bunch of witches, so we're practicing or compromising the gospel. The gospel is powerful, man. To make the gospel not powerful, you either have to add something to it or take something away from it. So we go into our spiel about contextual ministry, working within the culture, and they think we're witches. They don't want us there anymore. Our greatest opposition is from the old Indian churches that were founded back in the 50s. It's tragic. And we go in there with our ideas, and they just don't want to hear us. They don't like us. Fortunately, I started the Native District in Foursquare. I went down to headquarters, I went to all the department heads and said, here's how we're going to approach it. And they said, of course, that makes perfect sense to us. So I was out to breakfast with a guy named Jeff Yellowell. He's a Blackfoot guy. And our dear departed friend Richard Twist calls me that morning and he goes, hey, did you guys talk about contextualization until it was coming out of your ears? I said, no, Richard. I said, there was 7 or 8 drums here. He goes, what? Who brought the drums? I said, the native pastors. I go, Richard, if it was up to Foursquare, you'd be out of a job right now. He goes, you guys are so far ahead of everybody. You're far ahead of every denomination. But I think we've taken a step back now because they disbanded our district without telling us. And it's just like back in the old days. The senator would agree with the chief. He'd go back to Washington, D.C., and they'd change their mind. It's the same thing we've been facing for 500 years. It's just tragic. Any questions?
What percentage of Native Americans had to go through these boarding schools?
I think a great percentage. Do you guys have those statistics?
Over the course of boarding schools is what they were referred to here in the U.S., residential schools in Canada, and over the period of 1820 when they were established in Canada by the Anglican Church through to the last closure, which was 1996.
Wow.
96. The schools pushed through several 100,000 in total.
But who did not go to these schools?
If you lived in an urban context, you might go to a school that was a day school, still focused on or run for Indian children, but it was run slightly differently. If you were very remote, in some cases, in your community, you might not go. It varied a bit. In Canada, there was a forced attendance, a required attendance from 1884 until the beginning of the 1970s. There was required attendance from age 5 to 16. Schools could be as many as 1,000 or more miles away from your community and family. You may or may not see your family in the period that you were at the school, so it varied.
Did they have them on the big reservations in Arizona?
There were boarding schools. There were boarding schools in the Navajo res as well as elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is when the government relocated a tribe, which has happened all through history, they would relocate them to an area that was unfamiliar to them. They would take a Plains tribe and put them in the woodlands. They would take a Southwest tribe and put them in the Northwest. They just
to disorient them.
Yeah, and Hitler really liked the idea of the reservations. He liked that idea. He really tried to model his internment camps after them. And it's the whole breaking down of the human being. Take their language, take their history. It's tragic that this country did that, because if that was to happen today, there would be such public outcry. Willie Nelson would put on a benefit concert, but nobody cared back then because nobody cared about Indian people. We were considered less than human. We were considered a subspecies of human. So unless you care about somebody, you don't care what happens to them. And it's interesting to watch the migration of the European across this country from 1492 to now. Our lands, and now it's little specks across the land. It used to be all ours, coast to coast, and from ocean to ocean. So it's a great thing to have a Christ-centered powwow here. This was the first one in the history of the nation. Now it's being replicated all over Indian country.
But when you say it used to be all ours, land, wasn't the Indian view of ownership of land different than that?
Exactly.
The Western view is we own this, we buy it, own this.
It's interesting you said that, because there's a big joke that Manhattan Island was stole for a handful of beads. How can you sell something you don't own? They thought they were getting the beads for crossing the land. Like if I was going to Terry's land and I was going to hunt up there, I'd say, hey, I'll bring you back some of the meat for the crossing of your land, because I recognize that you're inhabiting this land. So that's what the beads were given for. They didn't know they were selling something, because they don't have a concept of land ownership. Just like most indigenous people across the nation, across the world, they don't have a concept of land ownership. And the thought of conquering another people and stealing their land is just unheard of among Indian people. It's It's something I think the Europeans came up with, Spaniards, French, and English. Yeah, so I don't, our worldview is different. In Western society, this will shock you, a man is deemed successful by the things he gathers to himself. His house, his cars, his jewelry, the clothing he wears gives him his identity. Well, the joke was the chief was the poorest man in the tribe because he gave all his belongings away. And today, even today, when somebody's honored at powwow, they don't get gifts, they give away. They have what we call a giveaway. And my fiance, she's Taos in Santa Ana Pueblo, and they do a thing called tossing. They toss gifts from the roof. And they do it every year. And I said, Charlotte, you guys are giving people among giving people. And you feel like that you make room for Creator to give you something when you give away. And when somebody has a birthday or they're honored, they do a giveaway, like you see at the powwow. We postponed it to April 5th and 6th, so you'll come and see all the giveaways that they do. And it's the Indian is deemed successful by the things he gives away, not by the things he gathers. So it's completely opposite of Western society. I think somebody said this, man's life consists not of the abundance of things that he possesses. Who said that?
Some famous person.
Oral Roberts? Jesus said that. Yet your whole society is based on a contradiction of that scripture. The people on your church council are successful businessmen, not necessarily the most spiritual. They're successful, what society calls successful. It's just an interesting concept. It's so completely different than our worldview, native worldview. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm interested in your comment about the native churches opposing your movement. I was going to ask Terry this morning as well, the same thing. What is the reaction you get among native churches, I guess a lot of them are Roman Catholic, I've been to some of those native churches of different denominations, but also among non-believers, among natives? What's the reaction you get?
We're running into something really interesting this last couple of years. Now, a lot of the people who oppose us are trying to go back in history and rewrite it. They accuse us of doing that. Remember that, Terry? There was a few pastors who said, oh, you guys, the society was full of sin and it was falling apart and disease and incest. And that's why we came and conquered you, to set you on the road to prosperity and to a good path. But we read the old writings of our chiefs, that's not the way it was. We had a viable, happening society, and it was growing and prospering. But they're trying to go back into history and saying, oh no, it was a failing society, failing in every sense of the word, disease and this and that. That's just not true. But we're finding the last few years that since so many young natives are getting saved under the contextual movement, we must be doing something right, because in the past it didn't happen. And when you go to the reservation and talk about churches, they go, oh, we don't want anything to do with that. They'll go to their traditional gatherings, they'll go to a sweat lodge, they'll go to a powwow, but they won't go to church on Sunday because church was part of the oppression that their grandparents and their parents told them about. And even when I started my church at Church on the Way, after the second service, Pastor Jack got phone calls, he got letters, get that guy out of there. He's teaching syncretism and he has no doctrine. So I went, my third Indian church service, I had about 70 people at that time. And we had a guy who stood in the back of the classroom. He had a master's degree in theology and a master's degree in archaeology. And he would stand back there like this. And he would go report to the pastors what I'd said. And then he said, oh, he has no doctrine. And so my third service, I got up there and I said, there's been some question about my doctrine, so I want to clear that up right now. I have none. I know Jesus and him crucified. That's my doctrine. And when you think about it, Paul was an educated man. He was a Pharisee among Pharisees. He was so sharp, but he abandoned all that for the knowledge of Jesus, the simple knowledge of Jesus. And that's what we preach, is the simple knowledge of Jesus. Invite Jesus into your life and you'll see some miraculous things happen. My dad was a very old man. I think he was in his mid-70s, just a hard-nosed guy, hated church, hated Christians. He was like me when I was young, just hated. And I had the privilege of leading him to the Lord in his mid-70s. And it was such a great honor. And that's how I know the gospel is powerful. The gospel is so powerful, the most powerful force in the universe, I believe. Any other questions?
Can you talk about something about the power and the significance of it?
Excellent. Good question. When you go out to the powwow, you notice that we're all, the arena is a circle. The circle is sacred with Indian people. The medicine wheel is a circle. It's a sacred thing. The circle is a symbol of the world. And everybody goes in and they dance in their own way, in their own style, but you'll never see anybody bump into anybody. You'll never see anybody touch anybody's regalia, because it's a symbol of the unity of the world. And we invite other people, other races to come in and dance with us. We have honored elders, and we're dancing our prayers. I asked my arena director, do you know what that means? And he goes, yes, it makes perfect sense to me. He's Gabrielino Shoshone. And he goes, we're dancing our prayers. Every time we pick up our feet and put them down, we're praying. And he goes, a lot of those songs are old prayer songs, old Ponca, old Kiowa songs, old ancient prayer songs that have been brought into the world, brought into the powwow world. And these powwows have been going on for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. And believe it or not, in the 1920s and 1930s, these powwows were against the law in the United States. The government got afraid when a bunch of Indians got together and started dancing. It frightened them.
Do you change these songs, adapt them and bring Jesus into them? Or
a few. A lot of songs are written modern songs, but there's some that are hundreds, thousands of years old.
And where the idea of the Great Spirit
exactly
is in those songs, you just adopt that.
Yep.
Apply it to the true God.
It's interesting because, 300 years ago, you'd never see a piano in church. Now it's almost required. Well, what happened about 60 years ago? Somebody showed up with an electric guitar. Oh my God. Well, they're still afraid of our drum today. It might have an evil spirit on it or something like that. So I said, when you bring a drum, one of our powwow drums into church, write one name on it that'll make it accepted. Yamaha. They'll accept a Yamaha drum, but they won't accept one of our powwow drums. We had the rare privilege years ago at up in Portland, Oregon. We got invited to be a part of their worship team. So we're rehearsing some songs we're going to sing there. And we set up a drum in the front, and we sang along with their worship their team. And we sang a few powwow songs. And the pastor goes, man, we were blessed. And I said, you didn't even know what we were singing about. And he goes, the spirit of the song was so powerful. And we invited him to sit on the drum, and he sat there and cried. And he goes, the anointing of God is so strong on this drum. He goes, I can't sit here. I'm not worthy. So a few people recognize that, and it's a great thing. And we think that, if God keeps confirming these things, it's sad in the beginning. Remember the first MMONVs, we had to have well-known white guys to bring credibility to us. We had John Dawson and Francis Franchipain, and they brought credibility to us. These Indian guys are okay. Their doctrine is sound. And it wasn't until a few years back that we stopped apologizing. We'd have to get up there and apologize for what we were doing. And now I think it's way more accepted. It's interesting, at Church on the Way, the Persian community could take over the lower prayer temple. They could decorate it with their beautiful art, and everybody goes, isn't God doing something great there? But if we show up with a dream catcher, they go, oh, get that away from us. They think it's demonic or something. Why is that? What is so scary about native culture? I think I have a handle on that. I think what it is this. The powers of darkness know how powerful native people are because it's our land. We were put here first. And I think the powers of darkness have sedated Indian men with alcohol because they know how powerful they are. And once the alcohol is set free in their life, they become powerful men of God like they were intended to be. That's just my spin on it. Any other questions?
How can we as believers and as brothers and sisters with you be praying for your Native American community and the Native communities in the world to have more freedom in Jesus? What should be parts that we are contending in prayer with for you?
We have immense, we had a mental health conference. My fiance works for the American Indian Counseling Center, and she had a conference, and a gentleman, a Mohican guy named Don Cloyes. Do you guys know Don Cloyes? He's the one that started the White Bison Alcohol Treatment Center. And he was a keynote speaker, and I was expecting him to get up there and go, well, this works best with Indian people. He didn't. He got up there and he goes, I want to show you that alcohol is not our problem. Alcohol is a symptom of our problem. Our problem is trauma, generational trauma. And he goes, we've been lied to, our lands have been stolen, our kids got stolen, everything's been stolen from us. So our elders carry trauma. And he goes, the younger people sedate themselves with alcohol. So pray for the trauma among Indian people. That they don't even recognize it. And my son wrote his bachelor's thesis on methamphetamine use on the reservation, which is skyrocketed. And he goes, Dad, he goes, when you eat food, your brain releases like 200 pleasure endorphins. Cocaine's up around 500. Methamphetamine is over 1,200. And when it stimulates the brain to that degree, it kills brain cells that never come back. And my fiance goes, it's so frustrating dealing with meth addicts because they don't remember what we talked about last week. And she goes, well, we're going to take off from what we talked about last week. And I'll go, we don't remember what you talked about. So they have to start over. And she goes, before you get with the chemical addiction, you have to deal with the trauma. And it goes, a lot of times you never get over the trauma because it's so deep. I think the church calls it generational trauma or something like that. You can imagine it's horrible among Native people. And apart from Jesus, there is no wholeness. I'm sorry, because it's a spiritual issue. It's a deep spiritual issue that Jesus is the only one that can even address that. So just pray for, trauma. It's interesting because when I was at Haskell Indian School, my dominant personality trait was anger. And they said I challenged the faculty, which I did back then. And that's why I got kicked out. I was there for 9 months. I was right here.
I was talking to Terry after his speech this morning, mentioned India. They have the caste system, so they have the lowest caste there. And we know that they're the first early adopters of Christianity tends to be those lower castes. Do you see any similarities between
Yes.
the trauma there and the Native American Indian trauma?
Yes. Listen to this. The United States, every 10 years, does this census thing. Remember that? Our buddy Richard Twist was on the poster, that last one. My son made a necktie out of that, by the way. Yeah. And according to the last census taken by the government, this is going to shock you, Native Americans have the lowest statistics across every culture group. We have the highest suicide rate, lowest education, lowest housing, lowest education. We have the highest rate of abuse. We lead every culture in everything bad. So if you're a Cambodian who came over on a boat 5 years ago, you have it better than Native Americans. It's tragic. We're the host people. And when I was at Church on the Way, I would constantly go to the missions department. I'd say, don't put us in missions. You guys should be in missions. You came from a different country. Why are you putting us in missions? Well, you're a different culture. We are the host culture. We are not another ethnic group. We are the host culture. We're hosting everybody else from every place else in the world. And I said, as soon as you come to grips with that, I think things will change. We're very hospitable people. They asked some of the chiefs, if you'd known what was going to happen, hundreds of years later, would you have welcomed these people? They said, yes, that's our way. So nothing would have changed except the abuse to Native people. Any other questions?
Not to in any way minimize the trauma, but I know there's another dimension, and just throw this out for all of your discussion, is a victim mentality. To have a victim mentality is also debilitating. And you say, we're not sinners, we're sinned against. The victim mentality, self-pity, that is debilitating as well. I know Bernard Lewis, as far as the Muslim world, he's an expert in Islamics. He says that many of the Muslim countries in the Middle East, they are always asking, who did this to us? Instead of, what are we going to do about it now? How much might that be affecting the Native?
The next generation, my son's generation, are coming to grips with that. And they're getting educated, they're impacting the Native community. It's our generation, us older guys, we're all right in the same age. We're the ones that are, we talk about raising up the next generation because we're afraid that once all of us go, that the contextual ministry is going to die. So we're trying to raise up all these new young guys. And they're all very sharp, very educated guys. And I'm a member of 2 or 3 organizations in Los Angeles, and they're all young, educated, Native people who are trying to make a difference. And they are trying to get over that victim mentality. You're right.
I think sort of the idea of victimization and inculcating in ourselves, within ourselves, the idea of being victims. While it has some merit in terms of its psychological impact, its emotional impact, and sociological impact, one of the things I like to say to people is that the circumstance in North America carries some differences with it that mean it's more than simply adopting or owning a victim mentality. When over a course of an extended period of time, you move towards healing only to have one more thing occur that pushes you back, and then you move toward healing only to have one thing push you back, it incapacitates you. You feel that you cannot do something because each time you move towards healing, you've been pushed back. And so, while it's difficult to give you a 200-year historical overview in a few minutes, we can very clearly identify places where, as the Native American or Native North American community moved towards healing, treatment that they experienced and policies that they were the focus of pushed them back into yet another place where they had to retrench, rebuild strength to try and move forward again, only to have the same thing done. So we're at a place now, beginning in the 60s, with the American Indian movement here, the National Indian Brotherhood in Canada, that took political ownership of our situation in a way that previous generations had been unable to do for varieties of reasons, that gave some foundation for us, I think, as our generation to build on.
Do you think the American Indian movement, they were shedding the victim mentality and saying, we're not going to...
Well, I think they were pushing back on a number of things. I think they were pushing back on constant breaches of treaty. They were pushing back on the fact that of all people, Bryan said it very, very well, we lead all of the wrong statistics. They were pushing back on that. They were pushing back on the continued incursion on treaty lands and reserve reservation contexts.
Is that movement still going, the American Indian movement?
Yeah. Every movement, when a movement starts with a radical thing like that, and like the Black Panthers, you very rarely remember the movement. You remember individuals.
Dennis Banks and
Exactly.
Haynes, right?
Yeah. And when you take an approach like we do, you remember the movement, not so much the individuals. Every culture has three things in it. Every culture that's ever existed and will exist has three things in it. Every culture has revelation from God, man-made religion, and satanic influence. Every culture has those three things in it. And we've seen cultures go into every one of those three things. We've seen some real dark things in South America. We've seen cultures go into man-made religion. And it's our job as Indian people to go into our culture. It's not your job to come into our culture. I have so many well-meaning non-Indian people say, well, the gospel doesn't work because you guys have so much darkness in your culture. And I'm always saying to them, well, I tell you what, as soon as all the darkness is out of your culture, you're welcome to come into ours. It's our job as individual tribal members to go into our tribe and say, this is what lines up with Scripture and this what doesn't. And we feel that very strongly that nobody has assigned themselves as the Holy Spirit to be an overall moderator of the Spirit. And it's wrong for anybody else to come into our culture. It's wrong for me to go into the Potawatomis and decide for them. It's up to Casey, because he's a Potawatomi. So that's one of the things we're real strong against. We don't want anybody coming into our cultures and deciding what's right or wrong for us. That's something that's very personal. That's how we grow as individuals, is God points out something in our life and we adjust it. So that's, and I don't know why the dominant culture does that. They just, it's kind of weird. Right here?
You know, as Bill asked the question about victimization and Terry responded, it reminded me, this isn't my area of expertise, but I did go through some training once on women who have been abused by their husbands, and they're trying to find a way out. And in this training I learned that this cycle, they taught us, they said, now, you're going to have to really spend time with this person because their tendency is going to want to go back to the abuser. They said, well, this is going to sound very counterintuitive, but that's what they've been. That's that's the new orientation that's been embedded into her mind because of the power structure
Yep.
and the fear and the intimidation. And they said, you know, if you've never been exposed to that, you're going to be very frustrated with this woman as she continues this cycle. But one day, if you stay with her, she'll hop out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's reminding me of this, where if you're not going through it, you say, well, she's a victim. Well, how stupid would she go back to
Right.
that?
You guys are familiar with the reconciliation meetings happening all over the place? The Indians hate those. Because what happens is the church will come and say, we want to apologize for past atrocities. See you later. We apologize. And the Indian will go, well, we're glad they feel better about themselves. Nothing's changed with us. What you have to do, and it's in 2 Samuel chapter 21, I believe. I did this little booklet on it. And I took it to Pastor Jack at that time, and he goes, have you talked to John Dawson about this? And I said, I haven't seen John Dawson in a couple of years. Well, the following weekend, I was sitting next to him at a church meeting out at San Ynez, and I told him that, and he goes, if Foursquare doesn't publish it, I'll publish it. True reconciliation is what you do when you offend your wife. You go to her and say, what do you say I have to do to make it right? Not what do I think. And she'll say, well, you got to do dishes for a week or something like that. And there's a very clear pattern in 2 Samuel 21 about how they reconciled. And a few of the principles is there was a famine in the land. Do you remember that? And David, with his closeness with God, said, what do I do about this? And God said, go to the descendants of those people and ask them, give me ideas of what you think we should do. And one of the things that they said was, don't insult us by offering us money. That's white society. Oh, we ran over your kid in a parking lot. Here's $1 million. That doesn't bring them back. And they said, the other thing is, we want your laws enforced back on you. And we also want the descendants of this person to be brought to justice. That was their criteria. And it's not that reconciliation is not apologizing to someone and then leaving. That's on the way to reconciliation. That's repentance, I think. And to this day, I have never seen reconciliation done right to Indian people. I've seen a lot of repentance. I've had my feet washed so many times. I'm sick of it. I want them to get to know me. I want them to talk to me. I want them to understand our point of view.
Well, so then do the Indians want restitution of land?
You know, the African American wants to be paid off, but we don't have a value system like that.
But you don't want the whole of the United States, all the states back.
You know what I think? I think that we should be able to appropriate anybody's land for a powwow anytime we want it. I would like to see that. And since we are land-based people, we have the biggest population of Native Americans in LA, other than New York, anywhere in North America, in LA County. Did you guys know that? But yet we have no land base. We have to drive through Little Tokyo, Chinatown, Little Armenia to get to where we want to go, but there's no native land. So we're petitioning the mayor to give us some land. We can have all our Indian health services. We can have a permanent arbor. I think that would be great. I think it'd be a great tribute to this city if they did that for us. So any other questions? You guys don't want to know about scalping? I really do want to clear this up. I speak at schools a lot and I get this question a lot. What about scalping? So I want to clear that up once and for all. Scalping is when you buy Laker tickets for $40 and you sell them for $200. That's scalping. We have a dear friend. His name's Ray Aldred, and he's a Cree. He works for. He used to work for CMA. Remember, Christian Missionary Alliance, and he doesn't really tell jokes that well, but he's got the greatest jokes. And he told me this one. He goes, the FBI wanted to hire a Native woman as one of their high assassins, so they screened him and they tested him. They narrowed it down to 3 women: an Apache, a Mi'kmaq lady, and a Navajo lady. And so they had the Navajo lady come in and they said, okay, this is your final test. We need to know that your allegiance to the FBI is above everything else. So they gave her a gun and they said, in the next room, sitting in a chair, your husband is sitting there. You need to go in and shoot him. Well, she immediately starts crying and goes, I can't do that. And they said, okay, you're not the woman for the job. So next woman comes in, a Mi'kmaq woman. They gave her the same instructions. She walks into the room, comes running out, go, I can't kill my husband. I love him. Okay, you're not the woman for the job. So the Apache woman goes in there and you hear crashing and shooting and crying and screaming and then dead silence. And she comes out and goes, you know that gun you gave me had blanks in it. I had to beat him to death with a chair. It's okay to laugh in church, is it? My son spoke at a domestic abuse Indian conference, and I said, I got a good joke for you. What do you tell an Indian woman that's got 2 black eyes? He goes, what? Nothing. You've told her twice already. He goes, that's going to go over real big. Yeah, I said, maybe you shouldn't tell it. Any other questions before we end here?
Jack Hayford was invited to speak at a conference year before last, and it was called the Billion Soul Gathering. Have you heard about that at all?
I haven't.
Okay, it's a large gathering of pastors, and leaders, and such who share on the website all their resources. But I did not hear the discussion much about, but it's mostly Western, but I did not hear much about this contextualization. But you say Jack Hayford is a big proponent of this, obviously, because of your relationship.
Yeah. Here's my question about that. You see these big conferences. There was a big conference a number of years ago, and I can't remember what it was called, but John Dawson and Dr. Trask and Jack Hayford were the head 3 guys at this conference. And I went down there to hear one of them, and I got their booklet, and they had a Korean track, Chinese track, women's track, Hispanic track, African American track, nothing for natives. And I wrote them all a really nice letter, and I said, hey, is God's Spirit poured out on native people or not? Do we have qualified native people that can speak at these conferences? Why weren't they invited? None of them wrote me back, not even my own pastor. And that's what we want to get these guys into those conferences. These are smart guys here. Can't we have an indigenous representation from the host people of this nation? I mean, 10 years ago, we never heard of these great black leaders like Miles Monroe or T.D. Jakes. They have brought a dimension of God into the church that was never there before. Wait until the Indian shows up. I mean, in order for us to fully be the body of Christ, don't we need indigenous people? Don't we need the host people of this nation? I think we do. I think these men are priceless. I think they need to be full-time speaking everywhere. But we never get invited.
Well, I told Terry this. I said, here we are at the U.S. Center for World Missions. Okay, we carry a lot of cachet, some people believe. And how can we advance the cause of what you're talking about to give a greater platform?
Yeah.
I mean, we have mission agencies, American Western-centric mission agencies going all over the world, sharing their training curriculum and church planning methods, but yet in their own backyard, less than 3% of the native indigenous peoples have been evangelized. So I mean, if I was an Indian in South Asia, from India, I'd say, well, if your stuff's so good, why isn't it working in America? What are you bringing it over here for? But those discussions never happened. So what I'd really like to do is to continue to be a catalyst here for how can we be able to help be a catalyst for you guys out there.
See, the church can send $3 billion to China, come back and put their arms around each other and go, aren't we great Christian people? But in order to deal with native people, there's a certain amount of responsibility and even a certain amount of guilt that they just don't want to deal with. So it's easier to go to China rather than the home people. So, I understand that, and I don't know if it's going to happen overnight. I really doubt it.
I think that's a good point, and just with Bryan talking about resourcing. So a year ago, this April, I was in Indianapolis at a consultation called by the Fund for Theological Education, Atlanta. So they have fellowships for graduate and postgraduate studies. Are you familiar with it? So they were hosting a consultation on doctoral education for people of color. So I was invited about a year and some before the consultation to participate as a member of the consultation. And about 6 months prior to the consultation, was asked if I would make one of the 3 opening panel presentations, which I did. The closing 3 panel presentations, one of the presenters was one of our NAIITS faculty, Justine Smith, who has her PhD in Biblical Studies from Harvard. So of 6 presentations being made, 2 were being made by NAIITS, myself and Justine. At the end of the whole 3.5 days, we had 2 minutes, each of the 6 of us, to do a summation focused on two things. What were we personally doing to advance doctoral education for people of color? And secondly, what was the organization or institution that we were involved in doing to advance doctoral education for people of color? So I shared what we were doing through NAIITS, North American Institute, and the work that we had undertaken over the last 15 years from our inception to present, and the outcomes of it. So I sat down at a round table that I was a part of, and next to me was the vice president academic for Princeton. And so he turned to me and he said, "Boy, you guys are doing some really interesting things and some very creative things, some good impacts. What's your budget?" So I said, "Well, it's $20,000 a year administrative. And then I raise my own salary. We pay stipends for our courses, and we pay them on a prorated basis given the number of students. We teach a course whether there's 1 student or 20. So we do all these kind of creative things, but our base budget is 20 grand. And it doesn't matter whether you make that Canadian or American." So he said, "Really? You wouldn't want to know what our budget is." I said, "Probably not." He said, "Do you know what Princeton's endowed for?" And I said, "No." "Take a guess." So I hazarded a guess. So he said, "Well, Princeton University, with lands and properties and investment, is endowed for," anybody want to guess?
$4 billion.
No.
500 million.
No. Keep going.
10 billion.
Keep going.
15.
Keep going.
20.
Keep going.
35.
Keep going.
60.
Keep going.
100.
$100 billion. That's Princeton University's endowment on property, land, and investments. The seminary alone is endowed for $723 million. So my response to him was to turn to him and say, "Sounds to me like we're doing a heck of a lot better job."
20,000.
But it points out the differential in resource allocation. That while I understand Princeton is an historic Presbyterian institution, etc., the resource allocation to maintaining their domination in biblical theology, philosophical theology, biblical studies, mission studies, yada, 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 is significantly enhanced by the endowment. So here we come along, a bunch of no-account Indians, with $20,000 a year to try and overturn that apple cart. It's a tough go, but that's what we're trying to do in some schools. We're trying to wrest what continues to be a dominating influence of Western theological method and philosophy from those institutions with not even a fragment of budget allocation available to them. And that has been available to them from churches that have an historic presence in Canada. Harvard is bigger, and Yale is bigger yet. So there I was sitting with Harvard, Princeton, Duke, Yale, Vanderbilt, all of the big outfits and their seminaries, theological schools, 2 no-account Indians, 1 guy and 1 woman. But we influence change by saying, "You guys can't keep doing it that way. Here's the outcome.
Yeah.
You got to stop and smell the coffee and realize you can't keep doing that."
Of measures of metrics of success of their curriculum, and here's how they do it. They do it by numerically, quantitative analysis. They'll say number of churches planted, number of people obtained our training, this and that and that and this. But what's happening now is they're finding that they're lacking in confidence now to this metric. And what some of us are starting to do is we're injecting an unknown metric to them, which is a qualitative metric now. What is the impact of your work? Mm-hmm. So very few people are doing work in this area. We're trying to introduce it because we think it will be a good and a more proper analysis of evidence of the true value of that curriculum.
And I think that's a really important point, because if you stop to look at what collectively the things that Bryan is engaged in, the things that Casey's engaged in, myself, and all the crew that hang around with us over these years that we've done, and then we funneled that in educational focus through the work of NAIITS, the North American Institute. So if you look at what we've accomplished in our relationships, supporting, encouraging, fostering, facilitating, negotiating partnerships. We've never built a bricks and mortar institution and don't intend to. What we've done is instead brokered partnerships with institutions that could further the objectives we think are important for the Native community to get us moving in the direction we believe God's calling us to move in. We've negotiated those partnerships, brokered those partnerships, facilitated them, taught into them, and so on. So in the less than 11 years that the educational component of NAIITS as a formal educational component has existed, we have graduated more people with PhDs, DMisses, DMins, MAs, and MDivs than all of the 8 traditions of the church from which we in our NAITS community come from in the last 140 years. We've done it in 11. Because we didn't do the political ping pong thing, we just said, we need to do this, we're going to go and do it. We didn't ask permission, and I'm not even sure at times we even asked forgiveness. We just said, we need to do this. We've got to overturn these negative statistics. We publish an annual journal. We host an annual symposium that's the only one of its kind in the evangelical Christian community, but evangelical in the non-U.S. sense of that word. Not fundamentalist, not Republican, not co-opted by a whole range of other ideas, but rather evangelical in the sense of belief in, focus on the good news of Jesus Christ. The person, work, life, teaching, death, and resurrection of Christ. That evangelical. So we are fully evangelical, but not in the co-opted political sense. And so we're the only one of its kind in North America doing that kind of work, and we do it on a shoestring budget. I mean, serious shoestring. In fact, I break these shoestrings pretty regularly.
We have a great influence at these conferences. We really need to take serious getting you guys to these conferences where we have input. And I hope they do that.
Well, that would be awesome. I think we would welcome that, and hopefully, God willing, we would not do it with any sense of haughtiness or arrogance, but with hopefully a reasoned humility. Because I know
there's plenty of that at these conferences. We'll never overshadow that.
Well, I mean, I think we want to speak in confidence. So, I mean, Bryan's talked about his lack of formal education, but he's one of the most well-instructed dudes you'll ever encounter. He knows the people and the situation better than anybody. He may not have the degrees that Kaser or I have, and others, but he's probably one of the most well-instructed men that we know, and the most informally educated that we know. He just brings a presence of God's Spirit to the things that he does that few other people bring, and he's been educated in the place of experience, and more than most of us.
Terry talks good English, huh? I have a question for you guys. There was an education system intact when Jesus was alive, yet he never pointed anybody toward that. Am I right? His idea was to develop the character. The Western society education system educates a person in a certain line, so when he gets put in that, he can get a job that pays a lot of money. But Jesus grows the person's character so he can put them anywhere and they'll prosper. So that's what we're looking toward, to develop the native character by introducing them to Jesus. That's our only goal. And putting these powwows on is a great thing, because Indians in urban areas go to powwows. That's what they do, because they've left their family, they've left their relatives. So they come and they adopt another tribal member as their brother, and they become like a close brother. So as I close in prayer, I want you to keep this in mind. Last year, we Native Hope International, who sponsors this powwow, it's my 501(c), we gave away 70 turkeys to Indian families that wouldn't have any Thanksgiving. And it's interesting, I think you guys moved Thanksgiving for a 3-day holiday. But we had it at harvest time. Is that right, Terry? We had it at harvest time because it was our time of thanking for this great harvest. I think it was back in September we had our Apache harvest. But we want to develop the Native character by introducing them to their creator. If you go to a tribal chairman anywhere in North America and say, what's the answer? They'll say it like it was pre-recorded. We need to return to our traditions when our tribes were strong. And I'm saying that's fine. Let's take it a step further back and return to the creator, the one and only true creator, to worship him. I'm saying, yeah, that's a good idea too. So Creator God, thank you for this time. Thank you for these blessed people. Thank you for the rain. Thank you for the food we're going to consume today, the water, the air. We're going to hear good sounds today. We're going to hear the voice of our elders. We're going to hear the sound of children laughing. We're going to smell flowers. We truly are a blessed people. And tonight when we close our eyes, they'll be covered by a canopy of beautiful stars. We are truly a blessed people. Oh, thank you.